Good evening, hello, and how are all of you? I have recently been to a wargaming tournament, as I do on the regular, and this particular game we had some interesting limits. And I'll go through my army list at the beginning, and then I shall go through all of the games that I played. I've only got a few pictures of each, so it's only going to be kind of a bit of an overview of kind of what the terrain was like, what the objective was like, and what kind of how I was facing my opponent, how I approach games, and how I kind of went through things. And then I do have something hidden away off screen at the moment that we should have a look at the end of the stream, and that will make more sense when we get to it. So I am doing this live stream on a Tuesday, whereas I would usually stream on a Monday. We did have plans yesterday. Unfortunately, those plans had to be rescheduled, but I said that I would do Tuesday, so I've done Tuesday rather than bumping the live stream back to where it usually was, because that would just confuse people. Certainly confuse me. It doesn't take much to confuse me. Well, let's have a look at the army list that I brought. So to understand the army list, you need to understand the rules pack. And the two important parts of the rules pack are that it is a 750 point game, so that's relatively small, given that the standard full-size game of Bolt Action at the moment is 1250 points. We're looking at a little bit over half of the usual size. So these can make for some very fast, very snappy games, but it also means that you have to think a little bit more about what you bring and how you balance things, because you can't just bring a little bit of everything like you can in the full-size game. You have to be a bit smarter about things. Now, the second point in the rules pack that I'll bring up is the limit on vehicles, and that actually helps with the first point. And the limit is just that you're not allowed any fully enclosed vehicles, and you're not allowed any vehicle with armor better than 7. So as you can see, I've got 3 vehicles in the middle. 2 are open topped, 1 is a soft skin technically, but that still counts, and 2 are armor 7 and 1 is armor 6, with an armored front, but still armor 6. So these all fit the rules for this particular event. The interesting part about small size games and not being able to fit everything in the list, partly you don't need to bring big tanks, because you can't bring big tanks, but also you don't need to bring anti-tank, and that is something that people don't necessarily consider when you're talking about smaller games, is that a full-size list can probably, like any unit the enemy can deploy, you can have a good shot at it. Whether it's a tank, whether it's a veteran infantry squad, whether it's massed infantry, you might not be tailored towards dealing with it, but you've got something that can at least have a go. Whereas with 750 points, you can't have an answer to everything. And so by taking away one of those questions in the not having the tanks, does mean that it makes things a little more well-rounded of an event, because everyone's bringing similar kind of not necessarily similar lists, but they have the same kind of restrictions on large vehicles, and so no one's having to bring lots of anti-tank. I think my best anti-tank weapon is going to be my medium mortar, just looking at my list here. Well, as we're looking at the list, let's look at the list. And I did realise just after taking this picture that I forgot one of my LTs. So I've got my LT, my lieutenant here for my rifle platoon, but I don't have my lieutenant for the heavy weapons platoon. So I ended up borrowing a model, a German rifleman with a nice teal base rim. So we'll see him in some of the pictures, I'll point them out. He did absolutely. I don't want to say nothing of value, but very little of value for the entire event. But I should have had him in here, but I forgot the model, so he's not in the photograph. As you can see, these are my Americans, and I have not played with my Americans in a very long time. And that's a shame, because I tend to do fairly well with them. I do have some very familiar units, and we'll go through those right now, in fact. So, we always start with the rifle platoon, and I've kind of scattered them around the photograph a little bit, but we can find these. So I've got 3 models in my officers team, and they all have submachine guns. And then I have a squad of 7 Marines with shotguns and submachine guns. And I don't care what people say about shotguns in bolt action. They're really good. I like them. Especially with submachine guns going up in price. These shotguns definitely have their place now. And they will be riding on the M2 half-track. Now, technically, that model's an M3 half-track. Shush. It's fine, don't worry about it. Essentially, I was shaving points down at the end and dropping the half-track from an M3 to an M2. Saved just enough points to fit me in the limit. But the main difference between them is that the M2 has a transport of 10, M3 has a transport of 13. And so with the transport of 10, I've got 7 Marines and 3 in the officers team. So I've got that 10. I also, up here, have 2 rifle squads. I think it's one squad of 8, one squad of 9. Both of them have a single BAR. Now, usually when I run Americans, I run a lot of veterans. 7, 8, 9 squads, 7, 8, 9 man squads, just like this, but as veterans. But again, lower points limit game. You want to kind of spread things out at least a little bit. You don't want to just have like 3 or 4 units in your whole list. That never does very well. And so I've had to cut the points by making these regular squads, and that hurts. And what that means is that the Marines here are the only squad in the entire list that are veteran, and that's odd for me and my my Americans. But we shall see that really does change how they play. It really does make a difference. Then I have my heavy weapons platoon. Oh yeah, so there's no weapons teams or any support elements in my rifle platoon. So I haven't got an air observer, haven't got a sniper, haven't got the light mortars or the anti-tank weapon. None of that. It's just 3 infantry squads, the officer and the transport. That's it. So, heavy weapons platoon. There is an officer, like I mentioned. I borrowed a model. We'll see him later on because I forgot to bring one. But it's just single model, inexperienced. I even took his rifle off of him so that he's just got a pistol to make him as cheap as possible. And I have 2 weapons in the heavy weapons team. This is an M2 Browning heavy machine gun. I really like the heavy machine gun for Conflict 47, and so squeezing that into bolt action is just a really nice way of doing things. This is actually my second heavy machine gun for bolt action. The first one was much larger. It was actually a crashed Jeep, very similar to this, with the machine gun on, and you can put a few infantry models on it to show that they're kind of crewing the machine gun. Whereas in this case, this is just basic heavy machine gun on a tripod with just a little base. And again, you tuck a couple of models around it to act as crew. Heavy machine gun has 4 crew. And here I have a medium mortar, 3 crew here. And because I was, again, shaving points, I wanted to have more stuff, but I needed to shave points as well. It's always that kind of that discussion you have with yourself at the end of a list. And I really wanted to bring more stuff. I wanted the quantity, because I realised that I was ending up quite shy on units. And if I just get shot off the board in the first couple of turns, I'm not going to be able to take any of the objectives. So I wanted to spread things out. So I did want some supporting elements. That's why I've got the heavy weapons platoon. and the medium mortar is inexperienced, and that means no spotter, and also I have no observer, so they need line of sight. And that didn't really become too much of a problem, but that definitely took fire. And being inexperienced, whenever they take fire, that's a bad day for them. So finally is my armoured platoon here. My original list for today was to have 2 Greyhound armoured cars. Because they're open tops on Armour 7, they fit the restrictions of this event, and I did have 2 of them to begin with, but I felt like switching things up. I wanted some other things. Again, kind of more numbers, having an extra shot. I think the big thing here is that I originally had 2 infantry squads, and that's just not enough. And so I've swapped out the 2nd Greyhound for an infantry squad, one of these probably, and then to keep the 2 vehicles minimum in the armoured platoon, I have a reconnaissance jeep, and this is the one with the armoured front, I think. Although no one ever shot it in the front, so it doesn't actually matter. And that's just got heavy machine gun on top. So I was playing the rule for the armour as it's an armour 6 vehicle, but if it gets shot in the front arc by small arms, it can't take damage. It can still take a pin, but it can't take damage. As soon as there's anything with any amount of pen, even a heavy machine gun, it will take damage. But just small arms, it's immune to small arms in the front arc. That's how I played it. But again, I don't think anyone actually shot at it during this event. Seems pretty quiet. Looks like no one's realised. I did say I was going to be on a Tuesday. I guess no one's used to it. I'll be going back to Mondays from next week. So let's have a look at game the first. Simple objective-based game. We've got a single objective in the middle of the board, and we are deploying first wave. So coming on in first turn from our board edge. Standard city fight board, lots and lots of heavy cover, and big open lines of sight so that you can always be shot at and always take fire, which means you're taking pins because you'll be hit, but then all of the heavy cover means that you're not always taking a lot of damage. And that is something that is slightly annoying. I do find it can be frustrating at times, but it's a different style of play, and I like playing variety of different maps, variety of different missions, kind of different layouts in terms of terrain. So it's good to play on something like this occasionally. So what I've noticed from my perspective is the train here, and we'll have a bit of a closer look at the train because the train is pretty cool. We've got this toy train here that is sort of blocking about a third of the board off here, and then kind of 2/3 of the board here has the objective. I thought, and this is a relatively common think that I think, is that this area here is not going to be very much use to me because I can't drive my vehicles through and get them into the middle. I can't run infantry squads in because they're going to be moving slowly over all this terrain, and anything I send over here is just going to be having a fight with whatever my opponent brings over here. And then I realized something, because my opponent is going to have the same problem. Anything my opponent sends over here is going to have to fight everything that I send over there. And so I sent a rifle squad over there, and I put some stuff very close to it here, and all of the stuff that I deployed on this side of the train line, I made it look like it could go over this way, but it was actually coming up to the center of the board. And this was to try and trick my opponent into thinking that I was going to be pushing up this right hand flank through this factory here through this terrain that I thought was actually useless to me, and I think it's useless to my opponent. And the idea of that trick is to try and get my opponent to deploy some units over here. Now, that worked at first, and I'll come back to that later because that went really well and is one of the coolest parts of this particular game. In other news, over here I've got these buildings that I can put my weapons teams up in. I have very limited ability to get my wheeled vehicles through because we have Dragon's Teeth blocking the roads. We have sandbags all over the place here that a tank could go over, tracked vehicle could go over, but my wheeled vehicles can't. Similarly here, I can get a vehicle up to here, up to this sandbags, but not beyond it. There's not enough space to get in front of the building here. So I've effectively got three roads to go through with my wheeled vehicles. And one is this one here on the left flank. And this actually has relatively open shot to go into my opponent's flank there that might be useful. I've got a zigzag here right in the middle of the board, which is going to be treacherous. That's really going to be a risk sending anything up there. And the other is all of the way on this side. It's actually just slightly off of camera. I can go up the board edge on this side, which would have been a waste of a vehicle. It would have been 2 turns just to get it up into the top corner, and then the third turn would bring it here. I could get it across, but then it would still be stuck here, and depending on where my opponent deploys, that might be useful, it might not be, and it would take 3 turns to get there, so it would be turning up in the middle of the game, and that's just not valuable. And so I decided something slightly counterintuitive perhaps. Rather than trying to force all of my vehicles forwards, I used my Greyhound and my Jeep with the heavy machine gun as fire support elements. So you can actually see in this first picture I've already put my Jeep down here behind the building to protect it for the moment. It's going to come up to the Dragon's Teeth. It's not going to try and drive over them. It's just going to move up to the Dragon's Teeth so that it's got fire lines here. And I did mention that my Greyhound is coming here so that it's getting fire lines over there. What I will send through here is my half-track with the Marines on board. And so I'm going to try and get those into my opponent's rear line and start smashing up stuff. Because that is a problem that my opponent's going to have to deal with. And that's going to pull their forces this way and away from the objective. That's the plan. I then have, and yet you can see them deployed here. This is my last rifle squad, and they're just going to come into the building. They're going to wait for the opportune moment to jump onto the objective. So let's have a look at turn 1. So coming on from first wave deployment, turn 1 is just getting stuff into position. There's no real fighting going on. So I've got one of my rifle squads over on the right flank. We can have a closer look at that train. So this is just a toy train that someone else in the group picked up. And it's a little bit too small. But my train track is a little bit too big, so I can't really complain. It does look the part. It looks really cool, even if it's probably about 30% smaller than it should be. I think it might be HO scale, but I'm not HO gauge, but I'm not actually 100%. It's one of the toy train sets that you can find on eBay and Temu and all the other ones. I've got my Greyhound here beside this building. Again, out of line of sight at the moment, but it's going to drive up here, and depending on where I want to shoot at, I've got a few options. So I can just move it to here, and that means I can shoot directly across at this building, or I can move all of the way out and shoot all the way down the road. So I'm assuming my opponent's going to set up various weapons and fire teams in those buildings on his side of the board. So just driving my Greyhound out to the front, to those sandbags straight away, will just leave it exposed to a lot of gunfire. And remember that even though an armoured car is not taking damage from small arms, it is open topped, and so it can still take pins. This is my left flank, and you can see my half track here with the Marines on board already lining up to go up here, and my opponent has put a squad here, which just is exactly where I want to go and is exactly what I want to do when I get there, is to start munching up some of his infantry. And this is just a standard rifle squad that my opponent's deployed here. There is, you just see them, there's a light mortar here, and behind this building, currently in cover still, behind this building is a medium machine gun team. And so this flank are going to be firing upon all of that, and the Marines are going to be driving up, getting up close. And the idea is to smash this very quickly so that I can focus on the center and hopefully have enough left to actually do some damage once that happens. I did say I was moving up some of my units as fire support, so I've got my medium mortar here. They're going to go into this building. My heavy machine gun is actually in the perfect position straight away. It's in cover from this, so there's no line of sight from here to here, but it's shooting across, and it's just out of frame of the picture, but the center of the board and the objective is just off this way. So my heavy machine gun's in really good position, my mortar's about to be in a good position, and I've got my vehicles ready to go up. And remember that the half-track has a machine gun as well. I think the half-track has 2 machine guns on board, so I've got lots of firepower able to go out on all the stuff over here. So as far as deployments goes on this side, my opponent has put things in just the right way to kind of lean into my plan. My opponent's deployment suits me quite well, because there's a couple of things over here, big infantry squad and a couple of weapons teams, and that's great. I can munch into them and from there aim towards the middle of the board, drawing his stuff away. Here's a close-up of the heavy machine gun team and my borrowed officer. So this guy here, this is the heavy weapons team officer that I forgot to bring, so I've borrowed someone else's model. I think it's a German model with a PPSH-41 Russian submachine gun and a bright teal base, so he's very distinct. In-game, he's an inexperienced officer with a pistol, and he never shot at anything, and I don't think anyone ever shot at him either. That might not be true. Here is the right flank, the useless side of the board behind the train that you really can't get at very well. And that also has fit my plan very well. Right here, this is my infantry squad, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is the slightly larger of the 2 standard rifle squads. And they're on their own over here. That's all there is. However, my opponent has deployed their assault squad with Sturmgewehrs and submachine guns, and there's an officer over here as well. So I've managed to bring a pretty nasty unit with teeth over here to fight this rifle squad, rather than concentrating on fighting my main force and taking the objective. And to begin with, that's great. That's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to tie up some units over here and distract them from the mission objective. And especially, I find it quite interesting that my Marines, which are the rough equivalent to this squad, both close range assault squads, my Marines have gone around the complete opposite end of the board. And I wonder how things would have been different if either I'd sent the Marines this way, or if he had sent his assault squad the other way, and they'd met up with each other. Because they're very similar in a lot of ways. Similar size, similar weapon loadouts, veteran. But yeah, my little ruse has seemingly worked, and I've got my opponent to deploy a very strong veteran squad and an officer on this side of the board where they're going to be useless. So, this will be turn 2. My Marines have moved up. Interestingly, I really wanted to get this half-track driving through this gap. So we knew it was big enough to drive through, and I'd be able to get up behind my opponent's line. Excuse me, I've had quite a dry throat today. So I really wanted to get... There we go. That should be it. Yeah, so I really wanted to get the half track through here and around to the back, because that's where its machine guns would be most valuable, and especially it would be the most threatening to, and that would bring my opponent over in this direction, away from the center of the board. However, because how things went up here, which I'll mention in a moment, the half track never had space to get through. There was always stuff in the way. And so it ended up staying still for the most of the rest of the game, and instead of moving forwards, it just sat there with its machine gun firing away, which is actually pretty valuable. So I've got all of my heavy weapons over this side of the board. The Jeep, the half track, the heavy weapons platoon, both of them are up here, and it's all firing from the left into the center of the board. But the Marines and the officer came out. The officer came out first to drop a pin on this squad, and then the Marines managed to get all the way here. I measured this out, and I put this guy as far forward as I could, the full 6 inches out, and I managed to get all of these in a position where this enemy squad didn't get cover. Amazingly, I didn't actually wipe them out, but I did so much damage to them that they've gone from my opponent's biggest squad to being a footnote. And so that first punch up this side was really valuable. I mentioned that there was a machine gun team behind here. They were about to jump up into this building, and I kind of wish I'd have got them up there, or I wish my opponent had got them up there before I'd have set this off, because what they actually did was hilarious, but not great for me, and that's they ran it, the machine gun team all the way from behind this building all the way to safety, basically behind where my webcam is here. But if they'd have gone into the building, they would have just been absolutely stuffed. There would no way out. They wouldn't have They wouldn't have stood a chance. Yep. So here we see Marines have charged in the subsequent turn. Can you see? I might just move my webcam slightly. There we go. So we can see the machine gun teams up here. So they were behind this building. They've run across here. This is a perfect position. And they doused this squad in gunfire. Really was absolutely brutal. And my officer here charged up to this building. There is a light mortar in here, and the officer just pummeled them. Point blank with submachine guns. Even heavy cover's not going to save you. So here's a big overview of the left flank at the end. This is turn 3, basically the same position. So we've got the Marines and the officer up here, like I've mentioned. We've got the half track and the Jeep with their heavy machine guns firing down this way. And the heavy machine gun team, unfortunately, didn't fare as well. Because they're poking around this corner, they can be seen by this building and this building. And there's an enemy squad in this building, and a squad and a medium machine gun up in this building. And all three of those fired down upon the heavy machine gun team. Not the Greyhound, not the rifle squad. They targeted the machine gun team because apparently my opponent really feels that they're scary, and wiped them out. So heavy machine gun was my first loss really early in the game. absolutely just obliterated there. An odd perspective. Give me a moment while I twist things around. So this is now the right flank. This is the factory that is completely useless to the actual game, and I have managed to convince this assault squad to come and fight my rifle squad. Between the two of them, they actually did. So the officer and the assault squad, I mean, they actually did quite a lot of damage to my rifle squad, and I ended up with, I think I ended up with 2 pins, and then I rolled a foobar. Except I didn't roll a foobar. I thought I had, but I hadn't. And so instead of, and so I actually moved the models out, and then we realised, oh no, it's not a foobar. It's actually just a failed order test. So I moved them back. And into their same position, and just put them down instead. And they, that was basically the end for them. Again with the odd perspectives. This is not a particularly useful picture. Ah! No, this is a picture of a 111. What's the 111 for? Ah, this would have been something absolutely hilarious happening. I have no idea. That is disappointing. Something important happened with the 3 dice roll there, and I do not know what it was. So this is my medium mortar, and the efforts that I had to go to make them stand up. So the way I've modelled this is the mortar itself is on just a flat base, and then each of the crew is on their own 25mm base, and you can put them on. There's just enough room to squeeze them squeeze all 3 onto the base. Unfortunately, once you start putting the main base onto bits of terrain like this, the crew don't actually stay upright. So I've just put the crew nearby, but that's them. How did this go? I'm misremembering something here, because I thought I was about to say that my Marine squad charged up at the machine gun team and knocked them out, and then my officer came through here. But I think my officer must have charged. Oh, I've remembered what that dice roll is. Over here. Yes. So the machine gun team has 3 models. So when I charged my officer into them, we kind of discussed whether it was fighting simultaneously or defenders fighting first because they're sandbag. But it doesn't matter, because all 3 of their attacks rolled a 1. And I rolled, and it doesn't matter. Any number would win, because as long as you have more kills than your opponent, you win the combat. I think I just did wipe him out straight away, so it wasn't actually an issue. So after charging the machine gun team, my officer's come down here. He's on this piece of terrain just because I want him to have that heavy cover, because there is the entire enemy force over here ready to shoot at them. And this is what I wanted them to do, is to get up here to attract attention away from the center. But my opponent was starting to see through my plans, and whilst he did send a unit, there's a blast marker here, there's a unit in here, this unit blocked off all of my stuff. It was only that one unit that they sent. Everything else stayed focused on the middle, and that's really well playing from my opponent to stay focused like that. And in fact, there is that squad. They look pretty cool standing in all the windows, but they are actually fighting to the left of the frame here, where my officer and Marines are. And that's the wider view of the same scene. So, on the right, I said that my tricks and my tactics were starting to fade, and my opponent's starting to see through them. And my opponent's at this kind of towards the end of the game, my opponent started to realize not necessarily what my plan was, but certainly started to realize what they needed to do to win the mission. And so they started to change things up. So this is the right flank where they sent an officer, who is now here, and an assault squad, and I sent just a rifle squad up here to distract them. And at first, my opponent was quite happy to be distracted to go up and fight this squad. But then something shifted, and he changed track. So he's charged forwards with the officer, and the officer has submachine guns here, and they are very handily tying up my squad. I've already got 3 pins. This squad is now not out completely, but they've taken casualties, they've taken pins. They're certainly on the back foot. And my opponent thinks that the officer here can deal with them, or at least can slow them down. But this assault squad is now doing something different. Rather than coming around here to fight me directly, my opponent is climbing up onto the train, and you can just see right on the edge of frame here, that's the objective, the center of the board. And so this assault squad are about to become pivotal to this game. And you can see there, they've moved. My opponent was kind of thinking of moving them behind the train, but ended up coming on top of the train. And there we see it. Now, this is where they were at the start of the last turn of the game. We'll mention sticky objectives, because this rifle squad here, I moved them forwards and they grabbed the objective, but then they got shot a lot and retreated back into the building. Sticky objectives means that once you touch an objective and make it yours, it stays yours even if you're not there. However, if you're not there, the opponent can come along and touch it and it immediately becomes theirs. And they need to be within 3 inches, so it's about there. And this squad has a 6-inch movement because they're coming down off the train, and so they are definitely going to be able to reach it. All this squad needs to do is move forwards and they win the game. That's it. And so and I checked, I kind of looked around the board and I saw, is there anything else that my opponent can do to take the central objective? And I realized these units over here, they're too far away. The officer, clearly too far away. Other units on the other side of the board fighting my marines, too far away. The entire game comes down to the assault squad themselves. And either I need to wipe them out so that they can't, that there's none left to get to the central objective, or I need to give them enough pins that they fail an order test. And so, one by one, I fire everything into this squad. Now, my opponent chose wisely in not charging forwards, because if they'd have taken one of their first order dice to move onto the objective, they would have died because I would have gunned them down. But by staying further back, I don't get the point blank bonus, which means they're a little safer. My heavy machine gun. Yeah. Here's my squad here that took the objective. I think I'm talking slightly out of sequence. So the rifle squad's moved up. They've taken the objective. The medium mortar, medium mortar, fired upon them. The machine gun jeep fired upon them. My half track is still in the middle of the road at the other side of the board, but heavy machine gun has 48-inch range, so they're in range. My Greyhound right here is actually point blank and shot. And my rifle squad over here also fired upon them. But my opponent came up with another idea. This squad here, the officers team here, they instead of fighting my rifle squad, they rushed over and gave their leadership bonus to the veterans. And it was the last thing I could do was fire my rifle squad that's over here, and I could either fire them at the assault squad and do another pin, or I could try and take out the officers team. If I got all three of the officers team, that would be a -2. Well, it wouldn't be a +2 leadership bonus, but firing on the veterans would just be -1 to their leadership for another pin. I'm not necessarily sure which was the best option, the guaranteed -1 or the maybe not getting them +2. I think I chose wrong, because what I chose to do was fire upon the officers team, and I only got 2 out of the 3. In fact, here we are. So so the opponent's officer has rushed up here to get the leadership bonus on this squad, and I have moved my squad out here to shoot them point blank. And you'll notice there's no pins, and that's because I left them down for an entire turn to clear out those pins. I was just like, I'm just going to sit here and let you shoot all those submachine guns at me, and then the opponent rushed the veteran squad in a different direction. I'm like, oh, you know what's going on. Oh, yes, not great, not great at all. 6 pins. The veteran squad ended up with 6 pins. And the officer, who did survive, gives a bonus of 2. So that's -4 to the leadership for the order test for this veteran squad. Veterans leadership is 10. -4 makes it 6. That is just less than a 50-50 chance. That's sketchy. That was sketchy. And both me and my opponent realized that this is the game. Right here, it comes down to a leadership role, because the central objective is mine, and I've been shot off of it, but it's sticky, so it's still mine until my opponent gets to it. The only unit my opponent has that can get to it is this veteran squad with 6 pins on. All they need to do in the last turn of the game is pass a leadership test. We had 21 seconds left at the end of this game. This is the turn timer that we use at the event to show everyone how long you've got, because we like to... the time we have is fairly generous. There's plenty of time to actually play a game. It's not like you're being forced through, but we do want to make sure people are kind of keeping on going and not dawdling forever, because then you miss out on games. And that is 21 seconds. So we had 21 seconds remaining in the game when the leadership roll was finally rolled. 6 and a 2. That is 8. That is more than 6. So that is a failed leadership test. That unit did not move. That unit went down, and I won the first game. That was such a tense conclusion. It was fantastic. My opponent and me, we both had great fun. The way that we were kind of playing with each other's minds about moving things around the board in certain ways, being very aggressive in places, being defensive, and just the fire support from both my opponent and myself, the way that we played. Very similar approach. We actually had very similar lists as well, in that we have a couple of rifle squads, an assault squad, and then machine guns. We did it slightly different ways, but kind of there are those similarities as well. Ratman, hello, how are you doing? What gauge is the train set? I don't know exactly. I think it might be HO. It's fairly small. I think it's the same scale as the one that I got about a year ago. Not the more recent one, which is O gauge, and that's a bit massive. Yeah, the railways. Let's find. There you go. That's probably the best picture I've got of the train. It's a little bit too small, but it's not terrible. Manco, hi, how you doing? 07. Yeah, it's one of the cheap train sets from eBay, Temu, wherever you get them from these days. It came with an unreasonable length of track. So we've got this is running 4 foot down the board. We've got a second line here with points, and that's running probably more than 2 feet down the board. And then over here you can't see it because we never went over there, but there's 2 passenger carriages and another set of track that's running the full length of the board. And we didn't use any. What on earth is my camera doing? Calm down. Never mind. So we didn't use any of the curved sections, but there's enough curved sections for 2 full circles. So it's got loads and loads of track, but the track is all plastic. So it obviously not compatible with electric train stuff. But I think you can put AA in this and actually have it's locally powered rather than powered by the rails. Yeah. So this game, really well played by my opponent. Really good decisions, especially just after the midpoint in the last third of the game. My opponent made some really good decisions that very nearly won him the game. This veteran squad could have jumped, was so close to jumping onto the objective, and it was literally 21 seconds to go, and we rolled that leadership roll. If that had been just a little bit lower, if that had been 6 or less rather than 8, they would have passed, and that would have been the win for them. So really close game, really well played from my opponent. And that is the state of play at the end of the board. That is the state of the board at the end of play. So my distraction rifle squad here has been whittled down to very little. My center rifle squad is gone. And my marine squad, there's only a few of them left, but they are causing havoc up there. This push went very much to plan. The distraction went very much to plan. Unfortunately, it left me with very little in the middle. So all I could do, especially at the very end of the game, all I could do was hope for that leadership roll. If I'd have had 4 rifle squads rather than 3, and had a second squad in here that could push forwards, that would have been better. But I've gone with a lot more vehicles and weapons teams than just infantry. And we shall see that having more infantry would definitely have been a good thing when it comes to Game 2. So Game 2 has an interesting set of objectives in that they don't appear at the beginning of the game. So we've marked out the center of the board, which is this here, and we know that this will become an objective, but the other objectives don't appear until the end of turn 3. What happens is there is a supply drop. You can imagine a plane dropping supplies, a little bit Fortnite if you're into that. Or you can imagine that there's certain other things happening around the board that only set off at that point once the fighting's already begun. People only, the soldiers, only realise what's important at that point of the battle. But the way it works is you roll an order die which has a little arrow on it, and you draw a line through the centre objective. And you roll 3d6 plus 9, I think it is, however, a random distance, and you place 2 objectives in opposite directions down that line. So let's say that you rolled your direction and you got straight across the middle of the board, and you rolled 12 inches. You'd end up with 1 objective here, 1 objective here, and 1 objective here. So 12 inches this way and 12 inches this way. If you rolled directly this way down the board, and you rolled 40 inches, it would be 40 inches would be off the board. 20 inches, then you'd be back here, in the middle, and back here. but you don't know where they're coming. You don't know where they're coming in, where those objectives are going to actually be until the end of turn 3, beginning of turn 4, and so you have to kind of take control of as much of the field as you can without overextending yourself and leaving yourself vulnerable. I also want to point out this terrain set that we use at this particular venue. I really like it because it's so different from anything that I played with in any other group. And it's kind of similar but quite different from the City Fight board in a couple of ways. So we've got these big sections of grass, doormat, literally doormat grass. And these will provide soft cover if you're shooting over them, but will not block line of sight. We have some tree sections, and these will block line of sight, but you can still shoot a squad that's inside it, or a squad inside can shoot out of it. You just can't shoot across it. And this will provide soft cover for anyone inside it. And then these hills, of which there are quite a few across the board, these will be blocking line of sight to anyone completely on the other side of it. However, if you're on top of it, you get no cover whatsoever, but you do get elevated position, which means you can see past all of the other terrain on the board. It's kind of not quite what the bolt action rules say, but this is how we discussed it with my opponent and myself discussed it at the beginning of the game, and that's what we agreed upon. Even though I didn't actually take advantage of it. So we know that the central objective is here, so I basically want to get as much of my force in sensible, safe positions around here, so that when we find out where the objectives are, I can move in and take them. That's a nice plan, and it didn't happen. But I've got both of my heavy weapons teams over here, and that's kind of, again, that distraction idea, but not really. It's a little bit of that distraction idea, because this stream is going to slow people down. So anyone who comes across here is going to have a slower time getting over here to where any objectives are. The only thing is that we could actually have an objective appear here, in this area here. Depends on how we roll. Ratman says, could you see past the trees from the hills? And yes, that's how we were playing it. It's not correct by the bolt action rules, but this, like I said, this is just what we agreed with my opponent and myself at the beginning of the game. Is if you're on a hill, you can see over this piece of terrain. Like if there's a unit here, you can see over that piece of terrain and shoot them without them getting the benefit of cover. If you were here and an opponent was here, like usually you wouldn't be able to shoot through because that's going to block line of sight, but because they have the elevated position, they can. Again, it's not quite how the rules are supposed to be played, but this is how we agreed at the beginning of the game. I didn't take advantage of it in the slightest. My opponent did, but I don't mind because that's what we agreed. Where was I? Yeah, so I think I'm running the risk that the objectives are going to appear on this side of the stream. And so there is a chance that it could appear here, and I'm just going to have to deal with that if it happens. So I've put, rather than putting my rifle squads over here, I've just put heavy weapons over here. This heavy machine gun on the hill has a great field of fire. Basically the entire board. The mortar down in the swamp doesn't, but still has line of sight to the center, still has line of sight to this tree line and this building. This is not blocking line of sight, so he's got line of sight all the way up here as well if he needs to. And so basically, it's a heavy weapons platoon. They are for fire support. That's what they're there for. That's what they're doing. And oddly, even though they're on the right-hand side of the board, their main focus, their main visibility is over here. What I've done on the left flank then is put my 2 rifle squads and one of my officers up here, and one of my rifle squads are up on a hill. They've got that nice elevated position so that they can shoot the enemy. But just like tracers, it works both ways. If you can see the opponent can see you. We'll get back to that. We'll get back to this squad and what happens to them in a moment. You will notice that my vehicles, in fact you can see my rulebook here, all three of my vehicles, my Marines and my officer, are not on the board. And that's deliberate. Because in this game, not only do we not get the objectives at the beginning of the game, we don't know where they're going to deploy, we also don't get all of our forces. So we have to put at least half of our forces in reserve. So I've got 10 order dice, I've got 5 on the board and 5 on my rulebook here. Ratman says the one guy on the hill is having a lie down. There's actually 2 prone models here and here. They're they're the crew for the light mortar. I've got 3 model light mortar and they're all prone, and so when I grab my heavy machine gun, I grab those 2. I think the others are... One of them is the spotter from my sniper because he's got binoculars, and I think the other one might just be a normal rifleman. I can't remember. If we get a closer view of them, I'll point them out. The mortar is actually properly using mortar crew, and they've all got their fingers in their ears. Right, you distracted me. What was I saying? Yeah. So, other hill guys falling. Oh yeah, these guys. This is something that's fairly common because this is why you don't see hills in war games, because they're just annoying. They're cool and they provide like a different way of doing things tactically. They're interesting in terms of gameplay and they look great, but models just refuse to stay upright. They slide down or they tip over. They're just annoying. Anyway, these 2 are on their side so that they don't slide down the hill. That's why they're like that. Right, so I've got my rifle teams, my rifle squads over here. I've got my heavy weapons over here, and I've got a big empty space in the middle because that's where I'm planning on bringing all 3 of my vehicles with the transport on board. They're basically gonna thunder road it right up the middle, take the center, because when that comes in, I'm gonna want that objective, and then from there, I don't know where the other objectives are gonna appear. I'm just gonna have to react. But if they're in the middle, then I can react to that. Whereas if they're further back, like if they're still back here, then they're going to actually have to force their way out, and that might not happen. So we can see my opponent's deployment. And my opponent deployed relatively thinly with their first units, but just like me focusing the vehicles, my opponent focused their reserves kind of on this flank, because this is where I was more dangerous to begin with. So we've got a few small rifle squads up here at the moment. That's an officer, and every single one of them shot this squad. And so immediately, as soon as we blink and start the game, this squad had 4 pins, I think, just immediately. That's showing the deployment of my heavy weapons. Strictly speaking, the way we played it, my heavy machine gun could see this squad, but I forgot, or I actually had better things to shoot at, because this building here, we shall come back to this building here because it is very important. But this building here, my opponent ran a squad into there right in the first turn of the game, and my heavy machine gun has started firing on it already, rather than shooting at this squad that's out in the open. Yeah, so that's the first pin on that squad. This rifle squad's moved up to behind this tree line, so they're pretty safe at the moment. And you can see there's one model there just on the corner. That's to show that there's a squad in that building, and they've got a pin already. This is showing my heavy weapons again. I did manage to get one shot just at long range, threading through between the hills, so they got no cover save at all. But after that, I went back to shooting at the building, and then the mortar was pretty much always shooting over in this direction. But It's just showing that my opponent has got some squads on this side of the stream and is pushing up, probably to take this ground in case the objective appears here, or if it appears on this side, at least they're nearby and they can take it. And this is them moving up to behind the hill, and this squad in the middle has also moved into the trees. Now, interestingly, with this squad here, these are a 5-man inexperienced squad with rifles. And I started firing on them to try and get rid of them, thinking they're only inexperienced, I'll clear them out, no problem. And my opponent just put them down. Not like a dog, but like as in the order, put them down. And so that means they have a 3+ cover set, so light cover and 2 for down. Yeah. So I ended up putting far too much firepower into this squad. I think I eventually whittled them down to nothing, but it was a tempting target that was not as squishy as they really should have been because of that cover save. So this is my opponent bringing in some more. He's got these really cool light machine guns on these oval bases. They look fantastic. But then there's another squad moving here, and as you see, my opponent's bringing in loads and loads of squads through kind of the middle and slightly more favouring this side. And finally, my vehicles have arrived. Annoyingly, my Greyhound actually failed its order test the first time. So my Greyhound didn't appear in turn 2, it appeared in turn 3. But my half-track is perfectly in position to move up and get to the middle, and my armoured Jeep as well. I realised when I deployed my Jeep like this, I turned it to the side so that I could zip out without turning, because I'd move here, make one pivot, move here, make another pivot, and I could go all the way over here if I needed to. Whereas if I pointed forwards, I would need to make one pivot to face in this direction, and then a second pivot to come here, so I'd be limited to basically driving here. So I've positioned like that so that I can have the maneuverability. But if you remember at the beginning of the stream, I spoke about the armoured reconnaissance Jeep. The front armour, it's armour 6, but it's immune to small arms damage. So if I'd have turned this to face this direction, I would have been completely safe from all the rifle fire. But because I've turned it to the side, my opponent actually has a target and potentially could destroy it. Didn't manage to, but that was a risk that I shouldn't have taken. What we don't see, and we will not see for the rest of the game, is the squad on the hill over here, because they no longer exist. That squad completely wiped out. But also my second rifle squad here, now in the trees, and has line of sight on everything over here. There's a machine gun team here, there's squad here, squad here, squad here. Lots of stuff, can see them. Target rich environment, great, but that means all the targets can fire back. So these guys are about to get a lot of attention. So this is showing my opponent's left and my right flank, and we've got a squad up here with a light machine gun on a hill, excellent position. They started causing me trouble, and we've got these two squads as well moving up on this side of the stream. Again, we don't know where the objectives are going to be. They might appear here, or they might appear anywhere around here, and these guys are going to be able to go on there. I was kind of worried because I'd focused so much of my force on my left-hand flank. Literally, the furthest forward unit I have over here is my mortar. And so if the objectives are across like this way, that one is just his. I just have to accept that he's having that. Ratman says, do you guys play that the armoured cars can drive through fields? So we're playing it that any piece of terrain essentially will block a wheeled vehicle's movement. So my Greyhound and my Jeeps can't drive through the hills or over the swamps. The half-track can, because that half-tracks count as track vehicles. But the Dragon's Teeth here, nothing can drive it. Only infantry can move over that. So a tractor or a wheeled vehicle can't go over the Dragon's Teeth. Same with the stream. So Tracked vehicles can go over the stream, wheeled vehicles cannot. There is a fording point up here, but we should have put that in the middle, but I think we have 2 fording points somewhere in the collection, in the kind of the box of terrain that we've got at the club. Right, here we go. So just before the objectives were positioned, my opponent moved this squad up onto the top of the hill. That gives them great firing line. It gives them great firing line on my weapons teams over here, which I remind you are small units, and the heavy machine gun's actually in open ground, being on top of the hill. And the medium mortar, even though they've got cover from being in the swamp, they're inexperienced, so they're still pretty squishy. So my heavy weapons are starting to take some fire as well. So here we go. My half track is starting to move up. Now I didn't want to race my half track forward really quickly to begin with, because we don't know where the objectives are going. However, with the squads and teams over here, and the stuff happening on the other side of the stream, this building is going to block line of sight, and this set of trees is going to block line of sight. So weirdly, the safest place for my half track is in the middle of the board. Rather than zipping around one side or the other, right here, where they're covered by this building and covered by this building, means that there's the smallest number of enemy units that can actually shoot at them. Now there's no place on the board where nothing can shoot at them, because there's this squad here that could shoot out the trees, and there's a squad in the building that can shoot out, and then depending on exactly where I'm positioned, there's a squad up on the hill up here as well that can fire down. These 2 guys here, don't worry about them. Don't worry about them at all. The machine gun on the the machine gun on the half track dealt with them. My opponent did put a machine gun team here, MG42 team, and that was really scary for this squad here. So I really wanted to deal with that. So I moved my armored jeep right here, partially to distract some enemy fire maybe, but also to deal with that. At least put a pin on it. Oh, sorry, I'm waving at the wrong screen. Right here. This is the scariest thing in my opponent's list, however. So I can't remember what variant it is, but it's the anti-air version of the 250 half track. And it has 2 medium machine guns. And it has 2 medium machine guns with the German extra shot. So even halved in a vehicle, that's still 8. 8 shots from that thing. That's dangerous. And I think it was that vehicle that finished off my squad on the hill back here. But then as soon as that happens, I know that he's going to drive around and he's going to be gunning down this squad. And once that happens, I've basically got no infantry left. So I'm in a sorry state if that happens. So what I do is I bring my Greyhound onto the hill. And I consider, do I shoot the anti-tank gun or the machine gun at the half track? So the vehicle's an armor 7. So any hit with the heavy machine gun will cause a pin, and if I roll a 6 to damage, I can do superficial damage. So that's useful. But if I shoot the anti-tank gun, that's a +4. So that's got a much better chance of hitting. However, sorry, it's a much better chance of doing damage once it hits. However, because I've moved onto the board, I've driven up onto the hill, it's an advance order, which means it's a 5+ to hit. And so I wasn't sure if the anti-tank gun shot would hit, so I wanted to make sure that I fired the heavy machine gun at it. And I took a moment to decide whether I was going to split fire or not. And I thought maybe I should shoot the heavy machine gun at the half track to make sure I get that pin. And I shoot a high explosive shot out of the main gun at some of the infantry, because that is a lot of infantry for this type of game. But then I ended up going, no, I really need to get rid of the half track. That's the big threat right here. If I get rid of the half track, then my Greyhound can shoot at the infantry all day long after that. And so I I declare that I'm shooting the half track with the machine gun and with the anti-tank gun. I roll to hit with the anti-tank gun first, and amazingly I get the hit. And I get a penetration, and I blow it up. And then I'm like, well, I'm not going to do anything with the heavy machine gun then. Wish I had split fire, but really lucky to get that hit in, driving from off the board. 5+ to hit. D6 plus 4 on the damage versus an armor 7 vehicle. It's a reasonable chance of doing damage, but getting that 4+ to destroy it was really nice. And at this point, I'm looking across the board and I'm thinking, I've not positioned myself very well. I've lost one of my squads and the second squad is already being pummeled, and on the right flank I've got my heavy weapons teams that are now really exposed. And so when the objectives come down, I have to really focus on winning the game through objectives, because I am losing the game in terms of controlling the field and in terms of numbers. I'm kind of on the back foot, as it were. But that Greyhound coming in and taking out the 250 was definitely in my favour. And this is the shot of the objectives coming in. So we rolled relatively straight down the board. It is at a slight angle. And so we have one objective here in my backfield and one objective right here in my opponent's backfield. Now my opponent had a squad on the hill within 6 inches, and so they just jumped on it and shot at me as well. But I actually don't have anything here at all. And I kind of looked around and scratched my head and thinking, what can I bring over there? Because I've got this squad, the infantry squad that is supposed to take objectives. They are so far away that a run order will only move 6 inches through terrain. And then they're probably still going to be in terrain, so it's going to be another. And then it's going to be the last turn of the game when they actually get there. So that's basically them. That's all they do for the game, is just that. And that's assuming that this squad doesn't manage to get through, which they might, and this squad doesn't manage to punch through, which they might. If you see my officer here, I've jumped out of the half track onto this objective, so I have got that. But officer's only 3 models. Officer is only 3 models, and so they're very fragile. And so what I should do, what my head is telling me to do, the sensible option, is to move the Marines onto the middle, clear out this, and bunker down and take that center objective, and then move something, maybe the light mortar, maybe move the medium mortar onto that objective and take it. That would have been sensible. I wasn't sensible, because right now I'm thinking I'm on the back foot. I need to be hyper aggressive. I need to do a big play, and if it doesn't work, I lose the game, and that's fine. If it works, it shifts everything. And so that's exactly what I do. So after dropping off the officer, I think I dropped off the officer in the previous turn. Instead of moving the Marines out onto the center, I charge forwards with the half track, and I drop the Marines on this squad here to take the backfield objective. And that's a big risk. Let's see how that goes. Is that just the same? Oh no, I got some mortar hits on this squad. Yeah, so this enemy squad here on the hill, they're kind of annoyed because the objectives have essentially been deployed 90 degrees away from where they are. But strangely, they are actually in a decent position to cross the stream and come across to my backfield objective, or to fight through to the middle, and all they have to do is kill my officer. Now, if you see, my officer is outside of the terrain here, so this squad can't see them directly at the moment, except they're on the hill, so they can. So my officers end up going down quite a lot and just taking the 5+ down save. on my left, my opponent's moving up all of his stuff. With the 250 out of the way, there's still quite a lot of danger up here. There's a medium machine gun, there's a light machine gun here, and there's a bunch of rifles. This is still kind of a threatening force, and I'm trying to push this way, and I'm considering moving backwards to go to my backfield objective, and I've got all of this on the front putting pressure on me, and it's like I'm not really 100% sure how to deal with everything all at once. But the one thing I can do to deal with it is use my vehicles, because the vehicles can't take objectives in the first place. So if I can use them to be aggressive on my opponent's units and also block line of sight, so that I can protect my own units a little bit, that'll be great. There's another shot that's almost the same as the previous ones of my heavy weapons platoon back here. They've done so little throughout the entire game. The mortar has hit stuff. The heavy machine gun has hit stuff. They've certainly done work. It's just nothing that they've done has been kind of game-changingly significant. I really want to point out this guy, but I'm not sure if I should save him till later. Greyhound's moving up, and it seems like my question about this squad has been answered for me. So this was 8 or 9 models to begin with. There was 7 of them in the previous turn, and I was considering, do I move to the middle with them to secure that middle objective, or do I withdraw them and bring them back to my rear objective? Well, my opponent gunned them down to 3 models with 3 pins, and so they're not doing anything, and they're not doing anything at all. They're just going to sit there. And so what I have on the left flank, I've got my Jeep with a heavy machine gun, and I've got my Greyhound as well, and that's it. And I just have to hope that that my opponent's forces over here can be fended off by just the vehicles. I did find a model to go back for the rear objective, and it was the officer. Now, I thought that he didn't stand a chance, because that's a road, that's open ground. And so he gets no cover save, especially from the unit that's on the hill that can see him. And also, he's an inexperienced unit, and he's inexperienced rating. And so one model, inexperienced with no cover, yeah, as soon as anyone shoots him, he's gone. But I think my opponent was feeling the pressure of those vehicles just enough that he didn't realise that he could shoot my officer, or he felt that there was always a more important target, which is one way that I do like to play. Because if you present your opponent with a lot of targets, they have to choose which to focus on. And whatever they don't focus on gets free reign to do whatever they want. And in this time, that was my officer. So my backfield objective, and you usually think that a backfield objective is your easy objective. That's the one that you should be able to have with no trouble at all. I had nothing in the area when it appeared, so I had to pull back this officer to come and take it. And I did have the medium mortar that was close, but by the time my officer got there, if my opponent had shot him, I wouldn't have had time to move my mortar over here, because it was pushing the end of the game. Oh, that's the one I used for the thumbnail, that's why it's so small. So here we see my half-track being hyper-aggressive. I have to talk about this guy. It's ridiculous. So, at the beginning of the game, my opponent moved a squad into this building, and I started shooting at them with a heavy machine gun. And over the course of the game, I've shot them with several other things. At the end of, I think it was the end of the second turn, there was only one model left. And at the end of the game, there was still one model left. That guy survived by himself for 4 turns of the game, just getting constantly shot at. He was down and in heavy cover, which is a 2+ save. So the mortar could have cleared him out, because the mortar would at least would have ignored all the cover. But I had other things that my mortar wanted to do. But if you see here, the amount of pins this guy has, I think he got to 7. But, bolt action 3rd edition, if a unit stays down at the end of a turn and survives an entire turn whilst being down, then at the end of that second turn, when you pull up that order die, you clear all of the pins that unit has. And this guy basically just sat down for the last few turns of the game, because is one guy with a rifle. There's not much he can do, but what he can do is attract a lot of attention, and that was something that I had to break myself of. Rather than focusing everything on this one guy, I had to break that kind of focus and start actually like playing for the objective, playing the mission. So my officer here, I very nearly charged my officer in to finish him off, which might have gone badly, but my officer ended up coming over and dealing with this squad instead. My half-track nearly shot at them again at point blank range. That might have helped. It would have got rid of down at least. But no, my heavy machine gun was sensible to shoot the other squad here. My Marines could have jumped out and charged or shot, but again, I was sensible and I put the Marines to good use elsewhere. Yeah, there he is. This little guy, absolutely immortal. And here is the result of the Marine charge, the angry truck. My half-track, after dropping off the squad, has actually nipped around the side, and it has caused all kinds of havoc over here. My Jeep and my Greyhound have all managed to move up, and between the 3 of them, they have done a massive amount of damage. And I mentioned a moment ago that there was this switch where I decided that my infantry need to take the objectives, and so they need to stop fighting. They need to do objective work. And my vehicles need to fend off the enemy. And that's exactly what's happened, but only on the left flank. And I've been completely successful on the left flank. The right flank, however, not so much. I have managed to shoot at the veteran squad that was on the hill. I did do a few casualties over there. I did manage to wipe out the squad in the middle. But you can just see it. Let me move my webcam. There is another squad here. And there's another squad further off as well. My opponent just always had more to go. Always had another squad ready to move in. I think that's another officer here. There's another officer here as well. So the left flank completely crumbled, but the right flank... Sorry. From my perspective, my opponent's left completely crumbled, and the other side was weaker, but still had teeth left. But at the end of the game, which is just coming up here, I think we have a couple more pictures, but this is basically the positioning at the end of the game. I do manage to turn around and put some shots over in this direction. This guy, I think, is part of this squad, and this squad. So I managed to put some fire into them, take off a few models, and that pretty much prevents my opponent from being able to move in again. Now that he's only got these small squads left, he's got no real answer to my vehicles, and my vehicles have just decimated the other flank. So if we'd have played on any longer, I would have been able to turn the vehicles around and come over here and maybe even table my opponent. But that was the end of the game, with my officer on the center objective, my other officer sneaking onto the rear objective, and the Marine squad highly aggressively charging forwards and taking that forward objective. And there we see, there's my officer at the end of the game on the objective. And even my weapons teams, they are still here. My mortar has taken a bunch of pins. They're just down in the swamp having a lovely time, I'm sure. And yeah, that's the same. That's just the left flank with almost nothing of my opponents left, because I've just moved up with those vehicles. There's 3 heavy machine guns between these 3 vehicles. yeah, and that's it. That's the end of that second mission. So I have done really rather well with 2 missions played and 2 missions won. So going into the last mission of the game, it's looking pretty good for me. But the last mission of the game was a bit weird. So we had an odd number of players, and as we commonly do, we actually did have a plan for a 3-player game, but it didn't end up happening because we lost the table because some other people showed up that wanted the table, and we're like, yeah, you have the extra table, and we'll do our own thing. But we ended up playing a normal 3-player game. I'm hoping that idea comes back because it was an interesting one. But we've got a normal 3-player game here. One of the guys with the British is back here behind the train. There's one of the guys here with the Germans on one side of the road, and me over here with the Americans on this side of the road. Strangely, between the first game and this game, this is the same board, and I'm starting in basically the same place. So if you remember talking about the first game with the factory that I thought was useless, that's that. Now at the far end, would have been on my right flank originally, and then my half track pushed through on this side of the road in the first game, and is going to do exactly the same thing here. However, because this is a 3-player game, 3-player games tend to take a little bit longer than 2-player games, just because you've got 3 full armies instead of 2 full armies, or even though we're at a lower points limit. And so we started doing what's known as pre-pulling order dice. And what that means is, usually when playing bolt action, you pull an order die, you give that to a unit, you complete that unit's order, and then you pull another order die. When you have a lot of players on the same board, what you can do is pre-pull. So you pull an order die, give it to that player, and you immediately pull another one. And if it's for a different player, you give it to them, and you can almost pull a third, although I recommend not pulling loads because it does get really hectic. But as long as you've got 2 order dice active at the same time, as soon as someone's finished, you pull another one out, and you just keep going like that. You can keep this cadence quite quick. There are certain situations where 2 players might get order dice and they're shooting at each other, and you do have to make sure that you go in order of like which order die was pulled first, kind of thing. But yeah, we were kind of silly with it in this one. We were very, very silly, in fact. So we threw out, like at some point we were throwing out 3, 4, or even 5 order dice at the same time. Yeah, it was kind of hectic, but it was a lot of fun. It was absolutely mental to have multiple units flying out at the same time, units firing on each other, multiple units firing on the same target. So if I've got some unit and my opponent here has a unit firing on this opponent's unit, there's actually times when 2 units are firing on the same squad at the same time. That was kind of fun. And it was just really hectic and crazy, and it was great. So I'm going to try to describe what's going on. So there are 3 markers on the board. Each of them form a triangle of 24 inches. That means that none of us start closer than 24 inches. And then in the center of that triangle is this light truck, and that's our mission objective. So at the end of the game, whoever's on the truck is going to win. Or if there's multiple, we'll end up with a crazy draw. And here's my deployment, and you can see very clearly I've got my Greyhound and my half track ready to go up that gap there and drive up into this opponent. And I've got my Jeep ready to drive down here, and my infantry ready to charge up here against this opponent. So I'm splitting in half and going in both directions. The only kind of concession I have to being sensible is my heavy machine gun team here. They're going to move on into this building, and they're going to be able to fire down on the center objective. So here's the British deployment. They have LVT, I think it's called, transport vehicle. 2 heavy machine guns or 2 medium machine guns, I can't remember. But lots of firepower, and just drove into the middle and just made a lot of noise. As well as, I think all of his infantry were veteran as well, which is how I usually like to play. I know it can be very, very effective. And this is the German deployment. Weirdly, if you remember the first game, there was a squad that was right behind these Dragon's Teeth, and I gunned them down with my Marines. We're going to repeat that. We're going to have another go at doing exactly the same thing. But my opponent has loads and loads of infantry. So he has no vehicles at all. And so in terms of numbers of infantry, this guy has, I think, one of the highest of the day. There is a medium machine gun in here, and I think that's a light mortar as well. So heavy weapons team with a light mortar and a machine gun. But otherwise, just lots of infantry. So I said my Jeep was going to race up down the board edge and have a go at the British. Well, it did exactly that, and the British responded by charging it. The British charged my Jeep and killed it. Just immediately. First 2 order dice of the game, or first two order dice in this part of the board. I charged forwards, and then my opponent charged back and and destroyed it. Over here, we have the Germans kind of moved more towards the British player rather than towards me, which actually was definitely the better choice, because I'm going to have to go through that area anyway to get to the center objective. So by moving in this way, he's not only putting fire down upon the British player, he's also providing a lot of line of sight over anywhere that I would need to go. And that proved difficult later on. Here's my vehicles starting to move forwards. Annoyingly, I didn't get as far forwards as I wanted. I only got to about here. But at least it's something. And my infantry push, I wanted to get into these buildings so that I could shoot on the British as they started to arrive, but their transport vehicle got there first. I did have an infantry here, and so I actually take the objective first, because infantry in a vehicle don't take objectives. Infantry, you have to be on foot, and so I took the objective first. Didn't last long. Here is some veterans jumping out of the LVT and gunning down my infantry squad point blank range with loads of submachine guns. And then that means that this squad here, officer team I think, and then this squad here took the objective. So now it's in the hands of the British. Because of the shape of the room, I ended up with a lot of pictures from mine and the German player's perspective, and not any from the British player's perspective, because I would have to basically climb over him to take any pictures from that angle. But you can see here my heavy machine guns firing down upon the middle of the board. My opponent's got lots of these squads and is starting to put fire down. Particularly this squad took a lot of punishment. But my Thunder Road push really got stuck in. The Marines, these 2 models here are what's left of my Marine squad, so it didn't go as well as it had in the first game, but I did end up winning just eventually. Having a Greyhound at point blank range is pretty nasty. So this is what's left of that first squad. I've managed to move them into cover. You can see quite clearly the objective is in the hands of the British player here. I do have a squad back here, and I was kind of being a bit defensive about them, because I wanted to hold them back until the last turn, because if I could run them down the road, I can move 12 inches on a run, and that's open ground, and I could get to the objective. But I changed my mind on that, and I decided I actually need to fight the enemy so that I can get to the objective without just being immediately shot up. So I did move them into the ruins here as well. But that happens later on, I think. Nope, I lie completely. That's not what happened at all. That squad has moved over here to fight off the British. Oh, yeah, okay. So I thought they went through the building to do it. They went around the back of the building. Yeah, okay. This happened several days ago. I'm trying to remember the intricate details. And this game was crazy and very, very fast-paced. It was mental. It was great fun. But I definitely was just playing quickly and not thinking things through. So I don't necessarily remember every step. So the last two Marines, I jumped them back into the half-track because the half-track has two machine guns. A transport vehicle can only shoot one at a time by itself, and so any further machine guns are shot by the guys that are being transported. So to do that, I put the last two Marines. They're not going to do much by themselves, but if I stick them in the back of the half-track, they can at least fire that other machine gun, and that's going to be a bit more effective. So I've got the Greyhound and now a machine gun armoured car, essentially, as a really strong fire support element. My heavy machine gun in this building has been shot to bits. That is an awkward perspective of exactly the same thing. So at this point, we're well over halfway through the game now. I have got very little left. So I've got my two vehicles over here. My Jeep is gone. One of my infantry squads has 2 models left. The Marine squad has 2 models left. So I've only got one infantry squad over here. My heavy machine gun's gone. My mortar's gone. And one of my officers' teams is gone. So I've lost a lot. I've got stuff left. I'm not completely out, but I've lost a lot. The German player has a full squad, a full squad, a full squad, and a full squad, and a machine gun. It seems like I focused down. I kind of split myself in two to focus on like one squad of the German and one squad of the British. And whilst I did achieve that in both directions, because I'd only sent half of the force out in each way, they'd actually come off quite badly on both sides. The British player, with my kind of punch into his guts at the beginning of the game, also was on the back foot. But the German player, just with the number of infantry he had, was able to weather the damage that I did, and was able to just soak up endless gunfire from the British as well. And so ended up like just not taking a lot of casualties. Like you see there, 4 squads just happily sitting around. This squad's taken quite a bit of damage, but the rest of them just don't really care. So here we can see, let's move my webcam again. So here we can see the LVT is now on fire, has been destroyed, and the German player has moved a squad out into the open, which has been gunned down to 2 models, and is within 3 inches here, so can claim the objective, but the British are first in the list for that, because the British were there first. Down on this end, I've got my 2 vehicles, and this is essentially all I have now is the 2 vehicles and the 1 squad at the other end. So that squad charges forwards onto the objective, kills one of the British squads. The objective is now mine, and then the German player decides to gun this squad down. Just absolutely fire supremacy from the buildings was just too much to even contemplate, and that squad got wiped out. I do have the 2 guys up in the building, and you'll notice sneakily hiding behind the corner here, out of line of sight from absolutely everything, in that position where I said that I could run out and take the objective at the end of the game if I was smart about it, is my officer, my inexperienced officer, the borrowed model. And is that the last photo? That's annoying. I was hoping I would have one more. So I'll describe what happens at the end of this game. The German player, if you see this squad here, they charged forwards, got shot up, and then foobarred and ran away. but they recovered and moved back. But they were just outside of 3 inches. I think it was like 3.25 inches, 3.5 inches. It was not far off. I managed to sneak my officer around, but the British had been there first. This is my squad. They're wiped out. So the British are on the objective. I managed to sneak in and get onto the objective, and then the German player doesn't quite get there. And so we talked through, and we basically said the British should get the win because they had the objective first. I should get a draw because I'm on the objective, but I wasn't there first. And then the German player gets a loss because they weren't on the objective. However, when I talked with the TO about the scoring, because we were playing a 3-player game, the app that he was using, the scoring app, it doesn't really work. It's not designed for 3-player games. It doesn't have that compatibility. So what we actually did is we said that the British player got a win, I got a draw, but the German player also got a draw, and we had to do it that way because the German player and I were in a 2-player match as far as the app was concerned, and the British player was against nobody, kind of. It's a bit of a hack, or kind of a workaround to make the app do what we want it to do, but we got it to do what we wanted it to eventually. But what that meant is that the German player got a draw, I got a draw, and the Brit got a win. And I think that's a fair way of doing it. But with my first game 1, my second game 1, and my third game technically a draw and an absolute crazy mad run around of a game, that means I actually won this event, and my prize is the Mark 1 automated infantry from Conflict 47. And if I change the camera view, I actually have them in front of me right now. And given that we have 20 minutes left of the stream, I thought I might build one. Because they don't seem that difficult, to be honest. Couple of legs, couple of arms, body, head, and the gun. Yeah, so that first game in the on that same board was pretty kind of tactical in the way that that both of us were playing. Definitely think my opponent played very well in that first game. The second game in that open fields, again, my opponent played very well, managed to get into good positions, and in probably the first half of the game, I was not convinced that I had a good position, and it's only kind of in the second half of the game, once the objectives had come down, that I was able to position myself in such a way to actually have the advantage. And once I got the advantage, it kind of steamrolled very, very quickly. Manowitz says, congrats, thank you. And then in that third game, just an absolute madhouse of rushing around, getting all of the order dice thrown at you all the time. And I was definitely goading my opponent, both of my opponents on, whenever they had the dice bag. It's like, go on, pull another one, pull another one. We were very happy whenever the person pulling dice got their own order die, because it meant that the game would slow down for a minute, because instead of pulling up the dice, they had to actually do their own order. Kind of a funny way of that played. So I know that is the front, and that is the back. And I also know that they're all right-handed. And they're kind of holding it in this kind of low chainsaw grip, kind of like there are certain Nerf guns that are this kind of Alright, it's going to kind of be like that. So I think what I want to do is put the right leg fairly neutral, pointed forwards, and then the left leg leaning out to the side of it, because that's going to give it that kind of that right firing pose. I'm not sure if you can see, but this is let's grab focus. I did wash these yesterday so that I'd be able to build one on stream today. I'm not sure if maybe using hot water like that is because I use very hot water when I wash models. Usually metal, especially in resin, like hot water when you're cleaning it, but this stuff, this is the Warlord CO cast. Very nice material actually to work with, but maybe it doesn't like hot water as much. I've accidentally put my focus program over the chat, so don't say anything mean about me while I can't see. There we go. Alright, so I want to put that the left leg now slightly pointed to the side and definitely leaning forwards a bit, so about there. That would be about right. There we go, just like that. Give that a second to dry and we'll sort out the arms. If anyone does have any comments about the games, how they played, or my list or anything else, do feel free to ask questions or make suggestions. I've always been very successful with my Americans. It's kind of strange. I usually play with a very like veteran focused force. Both my Americans and my Japanese as well, I play as lots of veterans. How is this left arm gonna be? Pose of the left arm is going to be the interesting bit, I think. One thing you can do with this kit, I know, is mix up the legs and hands, legs and arms, because they are interchangeable, and there are some different poses. But just for the moment, I think I will stick with as intended. Yeah, I think that's the pose. Let's just tack this arm in place. Because then I can adjust it in a moment. Yeah, no, I think I got that first try. I think maybe I want to move it a little bit further forwards. Yep, that's the one. That's it. Just the ball joint wrists. It looks a bit silly like that. So the shape of the ball joints here actually make the make it extremely posable, but also make it very easy to flood the joins, which is what I just did there. Try to use just a small amount of super glue the first time to get the positioning right. Let that first bit of super glue dry and set, and from there you can pour a bit extra super glue in on top of the dry super glue, and that will then spread into all of the gaps. Yeah, that's looking good. So just the head now. Smooth off his tin head. Love that the Brody helmet was often called the tin hat. So it's a tin man in a tin hat. Yep. So if I just position the head pointing... Come back. Every single time I've picked up the head, I've been looking at the back of his head. No, show me the front. There we go. There we go. That's looking good. Hey, why aren't you gluing down? I've glued all the parts of the model together, but gluing him to the base is proving difficult. I'm sure I smoothed off the foot. I remember doing it. So I'm just going to hold it here for a few seconds to see if that sets. Yeah, no idea what's going on there. There you go, one automaton built and nearly glued to his base. Just a couple minutes of stream left, so I'll wrap up in a moment. Actually, quite nicely on 9 o'clock. Are you stuck now? There we go. It just took a bit of time for the glue to dry. That's a pretty cool kit, actually. I look forward to painting him. But, for the moment, thank you to everyone for poking past. Ratman says he's a tall boy, looks like 40mm. Conveniently, I actually have my cutting mat, which has a metric grid on it. So we can check that. About 45, I'd say. Is about 45 from the bottom of the foot to the top of the head, or to the eye line. So roughly 45mm. So yeah, very tall. Beep beep boop boop. Daka 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 daka. Yeah, and this is only a Mark 1, right? This is Mark 1 automated infantry with the Maxim medium machine gun. So they get the Mark 2s are even bigger. Right, so I make that as near as makes no difference to 9 o'clock. So thank you very much to everyone for popping past, and anyone who shows up for the VOD as well to listen to my ramblings about some games that I played. As with all of my Battle Report tournament kind of discussions, this is your monthly reminder to go and play games, because playing games is fun. I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.